The afternoon sun poured gold across Arlington Heights, a mansion so grand it seemed to defy reality. Marble floors stretched endlessly, fountains glittered like liquid diamonds, and perfectly trimmed gardens whispered the quiet arrogance of wealth. The laughter of the elite echoed through the terraces, mingling with the clinking of champagne glasses. Among them strode Samuel Carter, heir to a fortune built over generations, his arrogance as polished as the floors beneath him. But in the shadows of this gilded palace, quietly sweeping the marble, was Elijah Moore, an elderly black janitor whose back bent under decades of labor and whose hands were rough with untold stories. He had worked these halls for more than 30 years, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and unseen. And yet, in this very moment, Samuel's voice shattered the quiet dignity Elijah had carried all his life. "Hey, Grandpa." Samuel's words cut across the courtyard like a whip. "Don't you have a rocking chair at home? Or are you planning to slip on your own puddle and make it dramatic for us?" A ripple of laughter followed, cruel and relentless. The socialites on the terrace leaned forward, their phones raised to capture every humiliating second. Elijah's eyes flicked up, calm, steady, but inside, a storm brewed. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Samuel sneered, stepping closer. 30 years here, and this is the peak of your life?" Elijah's jaw tightened. He spoke quietly, deliberately, his voice carrying more weight than Samuel could ever perceive. "I know enough to keep this place running while some people waste their lives mocking others." The laughter crescendoed. Samuel's smirk widened. "Feisty now, huh? Maybe you should write a book about how to mop properly. I'd buy it, just for laughs." Elijah returned to his work, his movements deliberate, reclaiming the dignity Samuel tried to steal. But inside, a fire ignited, a fire that would not be quenched by mockery or disdain. That night, Elijah sat alone in a small room beneath the mansion, the mop bucket now empty but his mind brimming with possibility. He turned to the books he had long ignored, poring over texts on leadership, finance, law, and public influence. Each page read was a brick in a foundation he intended to build, a future where his voice would be heard, his worth recognized, and his story told. He began strategizing. Small acts of preparation, quiet connections with local leaders, research into education programs, mentorship initiatives, all were pieces of a puzzle Samuel had never considered. Knowledge, he realized, was power. Respect, he learned, could be cultivated. And vengeance, Elijah decided, would not come from cruelty, but from transformation, from the undeniable proof of triumph over humiliation. Weeks turned into months. Elijah founded the Moore Initiative, a non-profit aimed at mentoring underprivileged youth, offering education, career guidance, and opportunities that the system had long denied them. At first, it was a small office, a handful of volunteers, and a few eager children. Slowly, the community began to take notice. Local news outlets highlighted the janitor-turned-mentor, the man whose decades of labor had gone unnoticed, now building a legacy rooted in hope and empowerment. Every success, every article, every child who thrived became a silent victory against the ridicule he had endured. Samuel, meanwhile, continued his life of lavish parties, yachts, and vacations, blind to the quiet revolution unfolding beneath his nose. The man he had mocked for decades was quietly building influence, admiration, and a moral authority that no amount of money could buy. Months later, the Arlington Heights Charity Gala was announced. This glittering event gathered the city's elite to celebrate wealth and influence, and among the featured speakers, a name caused a ripple of surprise: Elijah Moore. Samuel, perusing the guest list, laughed in disbelief. Who invited this old janitor? Did he finally learn to read? He imagined another opportunity to humiliate Elijah in front of the socialite crowd. Little did he know, Elijah had spent months preparing a presentation designed to command respect, expose the arrogance of privilege, and leave no doubt that true power is earned, not inherited. The night of the gala arrived, the mansion glowing under floodlights, fountains casting shimmering reflections on the marble terraces. Guests in designer attire moved gracefully through the crowd, glasses in hand, laughter filling the air. But all attention soon shifted to one man, Elijah Moore, walking quietly, confidently, toward the stage. Whispers spread, "Is that him? The janitor?" Elijah's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Samuel's smug confidence. The elite were about to witness a revelation. The man they had dismissed, laughed at, and overlooked was no longer invisible. And somewhere in the crowd, a figure from Samuel's past, a person who had witnessed the cruelty firsthand, watched, ready to illuminate the arrogance that had long gone unchecked. As the lights dimmed and the music softened, Elijah adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. Every eye was on him. The moment had arrived to transform ridicule into respect, humiliation into empowerment, and the quiet strength of decades into undeniable triumph. Just as Elijah prepared to speak, the crowd froze. Samuel leaned forward, sensing something unusual, a presence from the past, someone who could change the entire narrative. Elijah's story was about to unfold, but would the crowd see redemption, revelation, or the final humiliation of the arrogant millionaire's son? The night air hung heavy with anticipation as the Arlington Heights Charity Gala began to shimmer under 1,000 soft lights. Chandeliers glistened like frozen stars, and the murmur of high society guests mingled with the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. Velvet curtains framed the stage, giving it an almost sacred aura. Onlookers whispered, speculating about the unexpected speaker, Elijah Moore, the very janitor Samuel Carter had ridiculed months before. Elijah's steps were quiet, deliberate, measured. Each movement exuded calm authority, yet beneath the surface, a storm of determination burned. He had worked in silence for years, building the foundation that would now let him stand before this room filled with wealth, power, and entitlement. It had not been easy. Every evening after cleaning the mansion, Elijah would retreat to the small room beneath the grand halls, turning his modest living space into a workshop of ambition. Stacks of books on leadership, finance, and civic engagement lined the shelves. He pored over case studies of social enterprises, non-profit management, and community empowerment. Slowly, he learned to leverage media, attract attention to causes, and turn small victories into momentum. The Moore initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Children who had once faced systemic neglect now received mentorship, scholarships, and opportunities to thrive. Local media began covering his work, not as a novelty, but as an example of transformative leadership. And quietly, Elijah built partnerships with educators, local businesses, and civic leaders. Every handshake, every collaborative meeting, and every success story added weight to his influence. Samuel, in stark contrast, continued his life of inherited privilege, oblivious to the subtle but unstoppable shift taking place. He spent evenings in penthouses and yachts, mocking the world he barely understood. He had no idea that the man he had laughed at was preparing to stand on a stage and reveal a power far beyond the reach of money or arrogance. The gala itself was a masterclass in luxury. Ornate floral arrangements of white orchids and crimson roses lined the grand staircase. Guests in tailored gowns and tuxedos mingled beneath crystal chandeliers. The scent of aged wine and gourmet delicacies filled the air. Cameras clicked. Laughter bubbled. And yet, a quiet tension ran through the crowd as Elijah approached the stage. He paused for a moment, letting his eyes sweep across the audience. Samuel sat in the front row, his expression smug, unaware of the subtle glances and whispers around him. Others leaned forward, sensing something different. There was power in Elijah's presence, a quiet authority that did not beg for attention, it commanded it. The microphone gleamed under the stage lights as Elijah touched it lightly, his voice calm but resonant. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he began. "Tonight, I want to share a story, not about wealth, not about fame, but about dignity, perseverance, and the invisible forces that shape our lives." Elijah spoke of his years at Arlington Heights, his long nights cleaning and maintaining the estate, and the ridicule he had endured. But he did not dwell on bitterness. Instead, he shared the lessons those years had taught him: patience, resilience, and the understanding that true power is cultivated quietly, through knowledge, action, and empathy. He introduced the More initiative, detailing the children it had helped, the community programs it had launched, and the ripple effect of empowerment it had begun to create. Images of smiling children, community events, and scholarship ceremonies projected behind him. The room grew silent, moved not by spectacle, but by the undeniable truth of transformation. Whispers traveled through the crowd. Even Samuel's father, seated just a few rows away, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had long underestimated the janitor's potential, and now the room was witnessing the tangible proof of Elijah's quiet determination. As Elijah continued, he narrated stories of children who had overcome adversity, mentors who had dedicated their lives to service, and communities that had been rebuilt through collaboration and vision. Every story was a subtle rebuke to the arrogance of inherited wealth. Samuel, increasingly aware of the crowd's attention, felt a twinge of unease. The whispers of admiration for Elijah had grown louder than the polite applause for the gala's wealthy sponsors. He tried to mask his discomfort with laughter, but even his closest friends noticed the tension. Meanwhile, Elijah's presence radiated something far more potent than any socialite's charm: authenticity. He embodied the principle that true influence is earned, not bought, and every eye in the room, except Samuel's, recognized it. As the presentation approached its climax, Elijah revealed a figure from the past, someone who had witnessed Samuel's arrogance firsthand. A former colleague, once dismissed and overlooked, now stood in the shadows of the ballroom. Their presence alone was enough to unsettle Samuel, hinting at consequences he had never considered. Elijah paused, letting the moment stretch. The anticipation was palpable. The room leaned in, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Samuel's laughter had faded, replaced by a growing awareness of vulnerability, a feeling foreign to someone accustomed to inherited dominance. "Tonight," Elijah said, "I am not here to humiliate. I am here to show that dignity, perseverance, and vision can transform not just a life, but a community. And in that transformation, we all find true power." Behind Elijah, a series of slides projected the faces of children who had benefited from his programs, juxtaposed with images of the very estates and institutions that had once ignored them. Every image told a story of triumph over adversity, of invisible people achieving visible change. The crowd erupted in applause, not just polite claps, but heartfelt admiration. The elite who had once dismissed him were forced to reconsider the meaning of influence and success. Samuel's jaw tightened, the weight of realization pressing down. He had mocked a man who had turned humiliation into empowerment, ridicule into opportunity, and invisibility into undeniable presence. Just as the applause reached its crescendo, a quiet voice from the crowd called out, "Elijah, do you remember her?" The words pierced the room like a thunderclap. All eyes turned toward the back of the ballroom. Samuel froze, recognition dawning on him. A figure from his past, someone intimately tied to his family's reputation and his own history, stood in the shadows, smiling faintly. Elijah's gaze met the figure's. A subtle nod passed between them, an unspoken signal that the final chapter of reckoning was approaching. The room held its collective breath, knowing that the next moments could redefine not just the gala, but the very hierarchy of power Samuel had taken for granted. The microphone trembled slightly in Elijah's hand. The stage lights caught the sweat on Samuel's brow. And in that frozen, cinematic moment, the story was about to tip into its next, decisive phase. Would the presence of this mysterious figure expose Samuel's past and accelerate his fall? Could Elijah's quiet revolution culminate in a public, undeniable reckoning? The audience waited, hearts pounding, as the next act of transformation threatened to unfold before their eyes. The ballroom fell into a tense, expectant silence. Samuel Carter's face had drained of color, his carefully constructed mask of arrogance shattered. The figure at the back of the room, cloaked in quiet dignity, stepped forward, revealing herself under the soft glow of the chandeliers: Margaret Lawson, former executive assistant to the Carter family. Her presence alone carried the weight of years of buried truth, whispers of corporate deceit, and unacknowledged oppression. Elijah did not speak immediately. He allowed the moment to stretch, letting every eye in the room register the shock, curiosity, and anticipation. Samuel's mind raced. He knew Margaret. He remembered the countless hours she had labored behind the scenes, the countless times she had been dismissed, silenced, or ignored, all by people like him. And now, she was standing there, alongside the man he had ridiculed, ready to rewrite the narrative he thought he controlled. Elijah, Margaret's voice was calm, yet it resonated like a bell through the grand room. You asked me to come because some stories need to be told. Some truths demand to be seen, especially by those who once turned a blind eye. Samuel's eyes darted between them, a flicker of panic betraying the facade he had maintained for so long. His wealthy peers, accustomed to polished facades and polite conversation, now sensed the undercurrent of justice about to wash over them. The elegant atmosphere of the gala shifted into something charged, cinematic, almost electric. Elijah finally spoke, his tone steady but resolute. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not about wealth, or power, or status. It is about truth. It is about the lives we touch, the decisions we make, and the courage to rise when circumstances try to keep us down. The slides behind him changed, now showing not just smiling children from the More Initiative, but documents, images, and correspondence proving the systemic negligence, corporate greed, and arrogant disregard the Carter estate had exhibited over the years. Each frame, each piece of evidence, spoke louder than words ever could. Samuel tried to maintain composure, but the crowd's attention, the undeniable evidence, and the quiet authority of Elijah and Margaret pressed down like a physical weight. He stammered, attempted excuses, but the murmurs of recognition from those around him only deepened the tension. Margaret stepped closer, addressing Samuel directly. You laughed at the janitor. You mocked the man who cleaned your floors, polished your silver, and endured the humiliation of your arrogance. But he turned that very mockery into a force for change. And now, the world sees what you refused to acknowledge. The words were surgical, precise, and devastating. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, knowing that the power dynamic had irreversibly changed. This was not public shaming, it was a calculated revelation of truth, a demonstration that resilience, strategy, and moral courage outweigh inherited privilege. Elijah raised his hand slightly, commanding attention. Samuel, you believed power belonged to those born into wealth. But power belongs to those who act with vision, courage, and integrity. The More Initiative exists because we chose to do what mattered, not what was convenient. And tonight, we celebrate not the wealth that divides, but the impact that unites. The slideshow shifted one final time, revealing a side-by-side image of Samuel laughing at Elijah months ago and a current photo of Elijah surrounded by smiling children and grateful families. The irony was unmistakable. The juxtaposition brought a collective gasp from the audience, a mix of awe, empathy, and vindication. Even Samuel's father, a man used to controlling every room he entered, lowered his gaze. The realization of impotence and irrelevance settled heavily upon him. His son's mockery had failed to anticipate the transformative power of perseverance. Margaret spoke next, her tone firm but fair. Tonight, this is more than a personal story. It is a lesson for everyone present. We must recognize the value in every individual, respect dignity regardless of status, and understand that real influence comes from action, not inheritance. The crowd erupted into applause. But this applause was not for spectacle, it was recognition of justice, truth, and moral clarity. Even those who had previously dismissed Elijah now understood the depth of his impact. Samuel's attempt at social dominance had crumbled, leaving him exposed and humbled before a society he had assumed would protect him. Elijah turned toward Samuel one last time, his gaze unwavering. Your wealth cannot shield you from the consequences of your choices. But I am not here to destroy you. I am here to show that there is a higher form of power, one that uplifts, transforms, and creates a legacy worth leaving behind. Samuel opened his mouth, searching for a retort, but words failed him. The room, once filled with polite laughter and polite whispers, now contained an undeniable silence of reckoning. As the gala concluded, cameras captured the moments of shock, pride, and revelation. Elijah and Margaret moved through the crowd, shaking hands with supporters, each smile a testament to the triumph of resilience over ridicule. But in the shadows, a new figure observed silently, someone connected not just to Samuel, but to the hidden corruption and secrets within the Carter estate. Their presence promised that the story was far from over. A final reckoning loomed, one that could either cement Elijah's transformative victory or challenge him in ways he had yet to imagine. The whispers began. Who is that? What could they reveal? Is this truly the end for Samuel Carter? And as Elijah looked toward the future, he knew that true victory required not only exposure and justice, but wisdom, strategy, and heart. The final act, the resolution of all battles, both personal and systemic, was about to unfold. A mysterious observer from Samuel's past hints at a final revelation that could either elevate Elijah's triumph or present the ultimate test of his courage and vision. The stage is set for justice, redemption, and moral victory in Part 4. The gala had ended hours ago, but the energy it had created lingered like an electric charge in the city air. Social media buzzed with clips of Elijah's speech, Margaret's revelations, and the stunned faces of the Carter family. Headlines hinted at scandal, triumph, and a shift in societal awareness. Janitor's son turns humiliation into a force for change. Elijah walked through the quiet streets, his mind reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. Every moment of ridicule, every whispered insult, every setback had been transformed into fuel that had powered a mission far greater than personal revenge. He felt no gloating, only gratitude for the lessons learned and the lives touched. As he returned to his modest office, a message awaited him, an anonymous tip containing documents that linked Samuel's family to decades of hidden exploitation, unpaid workers, environmental negligence, and systemic oppression within multiple industries. Elijah smiled faintly. This was not a moment for vengeance, but for truth. He called Margaret, who had become not just a collaborator but a trusted mentor. "We need to ensure this information reaches the right hands," he said. "It's about justice, not revenge. About changing systems, not just humiliating individuals." Margaret nodded. "The world is ready for this. And you've already shown that courage and integrity carry more weight than inherited privilege." Meanwhile, Samuel Carter's reputation collapsed almost overnight. Investors questioned his leadership. Media outlets dissected every moment of the gala. Colleagues who had once envied his wealth began to distance themselves. His arrogance, once a shield, had become a glaring weakness exposed for all to see. But Samuel's humiliation served a larger lesson. It demonstrated that privilege alone could not protect those who ignored accountability, empathy, and justice. The world was learning the same truth Elijah had embraced years ago: real power comes from resilience, moral courage, and the ability to transform adversity into positive change. Elijah's story became more than a personal triumph. The More initiative expanded rapidly, providing scholarships, mentorship, and resources to communities often overlooked or undervalued. People saw that obstacles, systemic oppression, and mockery could be transformed into tools for empowerment. At one groundbreaking ceremony, Elijah addressed a crowd of young people. "Every challenge you face, every moment you feel underestimated, is an opportunity. Your strength lies not in what others think of you, but in what you choose to do with your life. Humiliation can be a teacher. Adversity can be a guide. And your voice, your courage, can change the world." Tears glistened in the eyes of many, as they understood that Elijah's journey mirrored their own struggles. They realized that dignity, perseverance, and moral clarity could overcome systemic barriers and societal prejudice. Elijah did not celebrate Samuel's fall. Instead, he sought to teach, inspire, and create systemic change. His triumph was measured not in revenge, but in the transformation of minds, hearts, and communities. Margaret, watching him guide the next generation of leaders, whispered, "You've turned pain into power, humiliation into triumph, and injustice into change." That is a legacy worth more than any fortune. Elijah smiled. It's not about me. It's about proving that resilience, integrity, and action can create justice where it seemed impossible. It's about giving people hope, and the tools to shape their own destinies. The world had witnessed the fall of the arrogant, the rise of the resilient, and the triumph of justice over ridicule. Elijah's story proved that adversity could be a launch pad for greatness, that humility and moral courage were true forms of strength, and that one individual's commitment to doing right could inspire a generation. In quiet moments, Elijah reflected on the janitor who had once quietly cleaned the floors he walked on as a child. That man had instilled the values that made this transformation possible: dignity, perseverance, and the belief that every person mattered, regardless of status. Elijah turned to the camera, as if speaking directly to every viewer. Your journey may be filled with hardship. You may be underestimated, mocked, or dismissed. But remember this: your strength lies in how you respond. Choose integrity over arrogance. Choose action over complacency. Turn your struggles into your story, and use it to inspire change, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. If you believe in the power of resilience, share this story. Talk about it with someone who needs hope. And remember, no matter how powerful others seem, true strength always comes from rising above, creating impact, and never losing sight of your dignity. A call to justice, and the reminder that transformation begins within, and radiates outward, touching lives, communities, and the world. This conclusion ties together personal triumph over ridicule, public accountability and justice, transformative social impact, moral lessons on resilience, courage, and empowerment, emotional and motivational call to action.